Okay. So welcome once again, Jane Tesner-Kleiner, Lower Columbia Nature Network. Next slide, if you could please, Michelle. So the Lower Columbia Nature Network, we're a relatively new coalition. We've been around as the Clark County Nature Network, a project of the Intertwine Alliance. But now we have funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for a 5-year partner grant opportunity to look at expanding and breaking down barriers to connect our community, especially kids and families, to nature. And schools is a huge part of how we can do that work. So we're working with environmental organizations across the region to really connect and foster great opportunities and support each other's work in connecting to nature. Next, please.
And
so our vision is to make sure everybody has access to nature. Everybody feels welcome and safe when they get outside. We want to elevate all of the work that our great partners do in connecting the public with nature and whatever tools that we can provide to folks and the different needs that they have. We do want to break down barriers, and addressing what those barriers could be is part of our mission of what we'll be doing over the next few years. So whether it's economic, it's transportation, whatever those barriers are, we would love to help address those. For our teacher and our school communities, there's several ways that we want to be able to help, including these quarterly teacher trainings and workshops. This is our first one, so bear with us while we work through any technology issues, but we want to help with specific topics and opportunities to support your work. We've partnered with the WSU Extension, Eric Johnson, in the past for school garden tours. Then, of course, COVID put that all to a stop, but we would like to resume in-person school garden tours and meet on site so that we can look at other examples of what people are doing, how they're running, and opportunities to share ideas. Then, of course, we want to be an advocate for green schools and help share ideas and make sure there's more green, less asphalt, and more opportunities for kids to get daily access to nature. So we have a website that we just launched about a month or so ago. Michelle can put that in the chat box for us. It's the lowercolumbianaturenetwork.org. Like I said, we're not a nonprofit, we're just a coalition at this point. But there's some great information on here of where folks can go to connect with nature and what they can do with nature. And especially we have an educator resource page. If you want to forward there, Michelle. We have what's called an educator resources. So when you go over to the far right, there's some resource links, and we have an educator resources page there that talks about ways to partners that can visit your school site, can present to your classroom, groups that take kids out on field trips. We have lesson kits that you can borrow. There's a list of organizations that have these amazing lesson kits. And there's lots of information there for school grounds and gardens. So feel free to visit that website and check out that resource link there. So our panel today, let's get to it because you don't want to hear me chat here. We have an amazing set of folks here joining us today. Mark Watrin from Battleground Public Schools. The Lower Columbia School Gardens is an amazing program up in the Longview and Kelso area. So we have Ian and Emily joining us, and then Kris Potter is here. So I'm going to let Mark introduce himself. Mark, if you want to go first, unmute yourself.
Sure, great. As we said, my name is Mark Watrin. I'm a retired science teacher in the Battleground School District and have been a garden schoolyards and school garden advocate for some time, helped lead field trips at the Casey Center. And I'm on the Washington Native Plant Society Education Committee. And I hope what to be able to bring to this is work that we've done related to matching up using schoolyards with standards, learning standards, and how to use the whole schoolyard, whether or not you have a school garden.
Great, thank you. Kris Potter is also up in Battleground. I'll let Kris introduce herself. She's with River HomeLink. Kris.
Hi, I'm Kris Potter. I'm the school garden coordinator at River HomeLink. River HomeLink is a public parent-partnered K-12 alternative school in the Battleground School District. I currently teach 2 gardening electives, one for children K through 4 and one for 4 through 8. I also, in the past, and hopefully again in the future, will be teaching a nature studies class. We have a outdoor learning space on our campus, which consists of a nature area, a vegetative bioswale, a hedgerow, and some other features, native plants. But we also have 16 raised beds for vegetable gardening, and that's the garden classes basically focus on vegetable gardening. Anyone in the school is available to use our outdoor learning space, and they can have, any teacher can have a bed in the garden if they want. I've been working with school gardens for about 18 years, and I'm trained as a master composter recycler as well.
Great. Thank you for being here, Kris. We appreciate it. Next, we have Ian Thompson and Emily Anderson from the Lower Columbia School Gardens. And if you guys would like to unmute yourselves and introduce yourself in your program, please. We have some pictures of their amazing work too.
Yeah, I'm Ian, and I have been, I started out volunteering in my kids' school. At the time, North Lake Elementary was the only school that had a garden. And so I sort of, volunteered for a while there, and then our school started helping a couple of other schools in the area that wanted to start, and it really sort of snowballed, and we started a nonprofit. And so it's interesting, when we were started, we felt like our crew of volunteers was good at building gardens, and so we thought that that's the skill that we could help other schools with. And we sort of realized as we were already into it that that's kind of the easy fun part, and that the really tough part is 5 years later or whatever, our kids getting out there, and when kids come out there, what's happening out there. And so we really have kind of changed what we do. So now what we try to do is sort of integrate the community with the school, so that the community is volunteering and supporting our local school gardens. And I'm just really impressed with the Nature Network and kind of what you're putting together. I feel like we go to trainings like this, in Oregon and other places, but not here, not in this region. And so this is just really exciting that we're actually doing this here. It's just seems really exciting. It's really exciting to have teachers on the call. We really think that teachers are where it's at. So anyways, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I am a garden coordinator at Lower Columbia School Gardens. I've been working there. I first started out as an AmeriCorps member for 2 years, and then I got hired on, and so I've been there probably around 4 or 5 years now. And I work with K through 8 students, and I have 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school.
Awesome. Well, thank you all 4 of you for being here. We're going to add Mark and Kris to the spotlight so you can see all of our panelists. And spotlight. There you go. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to just jump right into it, and I'm going to keep track of the time here. We have set aside till 5, but we'll try to get to 3:45 with an overview, and then save time for questions at the end. But like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and Michelle and I will monitor the chat for questions as we go along. So we're going to just start with, what does it take to get a school garden up and running? Like, what are the top 3 things that you see are the keys to success to start a school garden? Ian, let's start with you, please.
Oh my. Well, would you, at the same time, I heard what you said about questions at the end and getting questions in the chat in the meantime, but will you sort of feed those as they come? Because otherwise it feels like, there's so much to talk about, but if people have specific questions, that's sometimes the most valuable thing
Great.
to talk about. I don't want to say very much, I guess, because there's so much involved in, in one sense, you just need like a pile of soil and a couple of seeds, or something like that. So it's really a lot of times the idea is to kind of start small and show some success and build some excitement around something. If it's just one raised bed, that sort of thing. A lot of times, you know, our districts sort of require gardens to be fenced, and so a lot of times people are excited to start the garden, and then they realize, oh, we have to come up with $6,000 to fence this area and bring in water. And now all of a sudden it's not just, you know, pocket change and work parties, you know, it's like, how do we do that stuff? So there's a lot of sometimes infrastructure stuff to get around. But yeah, I really don't, it's so broad, I really don't want to just talk about everything to start a garden. I'm sorry, I'm not doing my job.
No, you're fine. You're fine, because to fence or not to fence is one of the big questions out there. So that's good. Emily, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, just starting with any type of materials that you can make into a garden bed and some soil and some seeds. You know, I think having a school garden can be, you know, a big garden can be intimidating at times, especially starting out, where, you know, how's it going to get taken care of? Who's going to be the, you know, kind of the lead on it? And so I think, you know, I would just kind of say starting small with just the simplicities of it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. How about Mark?
Yeah, I concur with Ian and Emily. I think one thing we've learned is each space is unique, and you have to look at the lay of the land and decide, you know, is this a spot for 1 or 2 raised beds, or can I get more ambitious? And is it going to be inside the school fence or outside, access to the community? All those kinds of things come into it. And then making sure that you include the school building stakeholders in what they want to see as well. We're getting a lot of excitement around just outdoor classroom spaces, whether or not it has a garden or not. And so, hey, if that's what they want, that's a great place to start.
Awesome. Thank you. Kris?
I think that for sustainability, I would tag on to what Mark said about in building stakeholders, but I think we need to look at a whole range of stakeholders, especially at schools. School communities are always in flux. There's always people leaving and people coming, including staff and parents and students. And so putting together a committee or a garden club or whatever that's going to be sort of the backbone of the program can help with sustainability. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where it's do as I say and not as I do. I don't have a committee at my school, and I worry about what would happen if I leave, you know, or if I am incapacitated or whatever, and I can't continue. In order for sustainability, I and the rest of us, we really need to look at getting a backbone of people involved. And I think it should be parents, students, and staff.
I can add a little bit more on there. When you said sort of what it takes to get a school garden up and running, I was sort of thinking about the physical objects, but really it's not about, you know, it's really not as much about the physical objects. It's a lot about, you know, the people to do it. And I just want to say, just to sort of remind us all, I think we all sort of know where we are. It's pretty universally understood as people learn what a school garden is and they see kids outside, they're like, this is a great idea. You know, this needs to happen. This is how kids are meant to learn. They're learning about food. They're learning about nature. They're moving their bodies. They, you know, they're calm. They feel better. Like, it's great. And then so teachers say, cool, I'm going to start a school garden. And they do that. But there's a little bit of like, you know, system-wide, there's not really a support for that. And that's what we saw in our town. And I'm not saying that what you have to do is do what we've done, but what I'm saying is that some of these schools, if it was left to sort of the school community itself, the garden would have folded, because they, those champion, parents, their kids were done with 5th grade, so they moved on. Those champion teachers retired, that sort of thing. And so, like, that's where we are. And so we need to sort of be doing stuff on 2 levels. One level, we need to like fix it so that, on a bigger level, so that it's just something that teachers don't have to fight so hard to get this thing in their school. And yet here we are, and we have these kids, and they deserve to be out in nature and, like, eat a tomato that they grew. And so what can we do to kind of do that? And so, yeah, I agree that the first thing is to kind of get together a committee of, committed parents, an administrator, maybe some community volunteers. I will say that as we've recruited volunteers, we really expected them all to be parents of kids in the school. And we have programs where that is, like, we have no parents, but we have these other people that just like care about food and the earth, or they just moved here from California and they love gardening and they live near the school and they're retired. And so we have a lot of volunteers who are not parents. And so I would just encourage you, as you're looking for who to involve, like, a lot of times parents are the last people that have time and bandwidth to do that stuff. And so that's just something that we have learned on our journey, I guess.
That's a really good point. Look for volunteers wherever you can find them and have it fit their skill sets so they can bring to the table. Excuse me. Talk to me a little bit. So what I hear from school administrators a lot is, well, what's the motivation for having these outdoor spaces? And some folks are like, if you tie it to a curriculum, that's great. We need a curriculum tie so that we know it's got some validity to it. Of the things that work well for your garden, what are those key elements that administrators will have that buy-in from having the feature outside, so that it can have that sustainability? Is it all about curriculum? Is it all about science? Are there other curriculum ties that you use to keep your garden programs going? I'll let you just unmute and go.
Sure, I'll start off. This probably is close to my area. So I think certainly principals are concerned about, how does it fit into kids' essential learnings and things like that. I can say that work is actually fairly easy to do and has been done. And so the key thing is, maybe don't reinvent the wheel. Come and find some of us that have done that kind of work, and we'll help you out. Depending on the grade level, it could be science, it could be English language arts more often. We usually find that a lot of teachers do English language arts. So for example, we did some work around the stories that come delivered to most of the kids in their science kits, either from a district or from the educational service district. And so if you're thinking like, where do I find that kind of work, just know it's been done and tap into us for a resource. I think there's a real growing trend in these spaces as key to some of the social emotional learning goals that are out there. We're even hearing this at the legislative level now, support for that. So I think that's a key component that goes in. And I'd like to think that, we could take care of all those things in advance, but I like what Ian said earlier in a conversation, that sometimes the kids show up and they have an original question and it throws your lesson plan out the window, and you go with what the kid had for a question, and that's your lesson for the day. And to some degree, that's what good teachers do anyway, is follow along with where the kids take them once they have an experience. So all of those things apply.
I'd like to piggyback on what Mark said and say that an outdoor learning space or a garden or a nature area really can be used across the curriculum. It's not just math and science. And also, as he said, with this newer focus on social emotional learning, the garden is just such a resource. I've had art teachers come out and use the garden. I saw a high school kid laying on his belly in the garden so he could get an eye level view of a plant that he was drawing. I've even had teachers come out and just have their kids bring their iPads and do whatever work they would be doing in the classroom, but do it outside. We've had teachers that do historical lessons. I have a teacher that does a historical garden when she's doing her pioneer unit, and they plant the things in their little 4x8 foot bed that a pioneer family might plant as their cash crops or their sustaining crops. We even had them plant some wheat one year. And then, if you're using something like the square foot gardening method, of course, that's excellent for math and for spatial recognition and things and patterns. But it really can be used across the curriculum. And if we can expand our vision and help our administrators expand their vision, that will make our programs more sustainable as well.
Awesome. And what are the basis of the programs? Is it totally tied to the curriculum goals of the teachers, or is it other programs that your team uses?
For us, the thing about us is that we are, there's 6 of us full time, and with 19 schools, and so if as the schools wait for us to come take the kids out, the kids will not be out there very much. So we're part of it, but really the other thing we're trying to do more of is support teachers so that they can bring kids out. Because but with us, I mean, we have spent lots of energy justifying and aligning lessons with standards, and so science is the thing. It's in GSS, and so we aligned a bunch of lessons ourselves. We found some other ones out there, and we're like, here these are aligned with your standards. And one of our districts said, we don't really care about science. All we care about is literacy, and we really we barely get our FOSS kits out. We don't really do science, so that's not currency with us. And we're like, well, now you tell us. And so we got their pacing guide for their literacy, curriculum. And we picked a couple lessons that lined up with the subject. First graders are learning about where food comes from, and third graders are learning about trees. And so we kind of designed a couple activities. But as it actually happens, it doesn't really seem to matter. It's about the kids, being able to make connections and use their hands and observe and notice. And what we end up doing for the most part is just what's happening in the garden. Here's the garden. What season is it? So what are we going to do? Are we going to, if it's winter right now, we might try pruning a fruit tree. We might just taste some rosemary and some kale because that's all that's growing out there. Are we planting seeds? Are we harvesting? Are we composting? And really, it's just the kids are involved in what's happening with the garden. That's most of what we do out there, is just facilitate garden time. And we do have some more specific lessons, but I'm just saying in general. And Emily, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think it was good. Just kind of like everyone was saying, there's a variety of different things you can teach out in the garden, from art to history to math and science, and social emotional learning. So, yeah.
I actually had a little thing to add. I'm another person from Lower Columbia School Gardens, and I wasn't sure if anyone was curious about the process of getting kids out to the gardens, because we kind of daydream more, or that teachers would be bringing their classes out more on their own, and they do some of that, but right now we're getting set up for our spring programs, and so I am messaging the secretary or whoever my point person is and saying I have these available slots, can we get teachers signed up? And yeah, some of the teachers, don't really care, and they're like, garden doesn't matter. I'm never gonna, let my kids come out to garden, and that's really sad. And then some teachers, are really into the garden. Some just see it as like a break, if some of your kids are going out to the garden. But yeah, it mostly just takes, kind of saying like, can I have your students, or, kind of coaxing them out.
I'd like to add about the standards. In my experience, and I'm not a certificated teacher. I was a homeschool mom for 32 years, but my experience with the standards is that if you look at the standards with, I'll just say kind of a blurry eye, you can find a way to make the gardening activities fit in to almost any of the standards. I had a high school mom come to me the other day and like, I want to teach gardening at home, but my consultant wants to know what the standards are. And so, I was able to pick out 4 or 5 standards out of her grade level and tie it to activities that could be done in the garden.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think the lesson is you can teach anything, but even if you just get them outside for fresh air, a change of scenery, and knowing that a lot of schools are talking about project-based learning and hands-on exploration and tying to taking that worksheet outside and seeing it on the ground. I think the more and more of these features that we can get built, you can actually see those lessons happening outside the classroom. Let's talk a little bit about your spaces and how do you get them in the ground? So what are some of the resources you've used to either find funding to build things, get donation of materials? What are the things that help you get the things in the ground? Mark, let's start with you.
Sure. I've gone a couple of different routes. I try to stay in touch with the various parent-teacher organizations. They've oftentimes been good advocates. And I mentioned that I'm on the Washington Native Plant Society Education Committee. I've written 2 grants to them. They do small garden grants, but big enough to make some significant impact. Might mention, we just had a committee meeting and they don't have a whole lot of people applying for their grants right now. They wouldn't mind having some advocates. So there's a hint for you. Find the Washington Native Plant Society for education grant. I've got a couple of models of gardens that have gone in Battleground that I like, that again focus kind of on the outdoor classroom thing, not just the garden itself. And we like some of those models. So one of the challenges is, how do we expand that model to other places? Not every school looks the same or is orientated the same, but we're setting up kind of a survey of what facilities the schools already have, so that we can see, hey, does this model fit here? Or do we have to come up with something unique?
I will say something about our gardens that we, someone in the early days in this first garden, a volunteer planted some grapes along one of the chain link fences. And, there was a time in September where, the kids are back in school and we just realized there's this whole fence is covered with food and we've done zero, we haven't watered this plant all summer, nobody has messed with it, and there's just enough grapes for 400 kids all to like eat some grapes. And so just really realizing that perennials are really something. And we think garden, you might just think sort of flat, rows of lettuce and tomatoes or whatever, but we're really thinking more about perennials. And so most of our gardens, which they are a lot of work, so it's not necessarily a recommendation, but most of them will have, some somewhat orderly veggie beds for sort of rotating annual crops, whether those are raised in a box or whether they're just mounded soil, but just kind of some rectangular beds for veggies, an open gathering space to, gather a group of kids, and then sort of some fruit trees with some plantings underneath of them, sort of like a food forest is one sort of way that people think about planting like that, but sort of companion planting, so herbs and berries and other plants sort of underneath these fruit trees, and sort of some curvy paths so that there's a little bit more. It's not a wilderness, it's not a real forest, but it's sort of like being in nature. You're walking under plants as opposed to just like over small plants. So that's just something that that we think about when we're doing that. And in
the
some
whole-
ways, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, just in some ways, as far as maintenance, if you have a veggie garden and you turn your back for a number of months, you don't have a veggie garden anymore. You just have a grassy field, but if you have a fruit tree or, a grapevine, you can turn your back and you come back and there's, this thing is still there year after year. So there's just a different kind of value in that. Both ways. If you're doing something temporary, you're not really sure what the future is of your garden committee, then you can there's no harm in putting in some beds and, or tilling something up and planting some seeds. Whereas, fruit trees is more of, like, oh, we're going to be doing this for a while. Someone's going to be taking care of this tree for decades.
Right. And boy, if that doesn't teach perseverance and patience with the kids, is you can't just plant it and see it tomorrow. You got to wait. There's a great lesson in that too. What else?
For funding, I'd like to put in a plug for the Master Gardener Foundation of Clark County. They have grant funds available every year and for a variety of different projects. And they're very open to working with schools and school gardens. And I've been able to receive some money from them for the last many years. I also received a grant from Clark County, which was way back, like in 2004 when I started my first school garden. But I have to say that I have run this school garden program at River HomeLink for 18 years with no district money. So I've been able to do everything with grants, just these small grants that I come across, nothing big, and salvaged and reused materials. And a school garden, in my opinion and in my experience, doesn't have to be an expensive enterprise, especially if you start small and then expand as you get more funds and get more other kinds of support.
Great, thank you.
Kris, do you, when you do get a grant or donations, how do you manage that money? Is that like the school's PTO, or who handles that?
The way the Master Gardener Foundation grant works, it's a reimbursement grant. So the money doesn't actually come to the school. I just buy things myself and then they reimburse. I submit the receipts and they reimburse me. And then that first grant, I don't even remember. That was so far back that everything has changed since then.
Usually,
but I think it does have to. I think the best way is to go through the PTA or something like that.
Usually that's a recommendation we give. I mean, not every school has a functioning PTO that actually has their nonprofit whatever paperwork in order. But generally, when we would get a donation or something, if we gave it to the school district, it was oftentimes really hard to spend it. To get that money, you have to do a PO, or someone has to buy the thing out of their pocket and then submit a receipt and wait a month to get reimbursed. Whereas a PTO, they can just set up a line item, a bucket for garden funds. And if you're lucky, I just think a good thing to try to do with PTOs is say, can we have a garden, fund, and then would PTO put some skin in the game, even if it's $50 or $100 a year? Would you just have an annual thing that you give, and then maybe that gets upped over the years? But that can be a good model.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Awesome. I also know that there are many groups in our communities that are always looking for opportunities to donate to schools. And so knowing what you need is a good first start. And sometimes even answering that question can be hard. So working with our local groups to try to make sure you've got a plant list that works for you. Don't plant the wrong thing. And then all of a sudden you have way too much lemon balm or chamomile because it's now everywhere. Been there, done that. So knowing what you want and sticking to that wish list, there are groups that would love to donate to schools. I'm going to put one of them here in the chat. It's there's a Facebook group, and I know the Lakeshore Elementary butterfly garden recently used this, and they got 3 times as many plants as they needed. So we actually, instead of just doing one bed, it went all the way around the building and filled up a whole second bed because we had so many great butterfly and pollinator plants. So there are other social media outlets there to tap into our local gardeners. Like if anybody needs black-eyed Susan, my yard's got a ton. You tell me, I'll dig it up and drop it off for you, that kind of thing. So yeah. Let's get to one of the questions that is always on everybody's mind, is that never-ending maintenance piece. And the first thing I hear from a lot of principals, like, we don't want to garden because there's nobody here to take care of it over the summer. And I'm always a fan of, well, you can plant sunflowers and nasturtium and marigolds, and they'll be there in the fall for the kids to harvest seeds. But let's talk a little bit about maintenance and how each of your gardens work on the maintenance piece.
Summer started out as a problem, to sort of overcome. What do we do about summer when the crops need more water and are ready to be harvested and the weeds are growing? And we sort of have, and again, this is why I just want to make sure what we're talking about is relevant, because I know that there's classroom teachers in the room, and what we're doing is not as classroom teachers. So I want it to be transferable, but so we, do stuff during the summer. One thing that I think has been really key is if you can swing having a day a week, over the summer, Tuesdays, 10 to noon, the garden will be open, and somebody will be there. If you show up, somebody will be there to show you, what to water, what to pick, whatever. And you can put that, on your reader board. You can send that home in backpacks at the end of the school year. You can put it in the newspaper, whatever. And as you see kids at the grocery store, just say, hey, don't forget, come on Tuesdays, that sort of thing. And then if teachers can just sign up, to be there one of those Tuesdays over the course of the summer, or parents or whoever, and, all they have to do is show up, unlock the gate if there's a gate, and then just kind of, greet people as they come in. And I think just having humans predictably in the garden every week means that big weed problems are going to be taken care of, because you're going to see them happening, and food's going to get picked, and some stuff's going to happen. It's going to get watered at least once a week. So I think that's kind of a key strategy that you can kind of build around a predictable day. And then we sort of publish a schedule. Here's all the gardens, here's the days that they're open,
Mark, how about, oh, go ahead, Kris.
We have had some success recruiting families from the school, whether they're families from gardening class or not. Just letting it be known that a family can adopt a bed or 2 during the summer. And then I just do an orientation and training sort of with those families, and show them how to access water and how to access tools. And then they can come at their convenience on their own schedule and just take care of their 1 or 2 beds. And that has worked well for us. Another option is to just plan maybe that the garden will sleep during the summer. It may seem like a waste, but it's better than having an unkempt garden for the summer. So after the spring crops are harvested, maybe cover the garden with mulch. And then whether you have volunteers or teachers or whatever, come back in about late July, early August, and plant so that there are things ready and growing when the kids get back to school.
Yeah, I'll say ditto to what Kris just said there. A couple of the gardens that we've got, we just close them down for the hot part of the summer and restart them, like you said, in early to mid-August even, and they still get plenty of things ready to go. I liked Ian's earlier suggestion too with the perennials and the fruit trees and things like that. I focus a lot on native plant gardens and schoolyard species variety, helping the school maintenance think about, hey, we don't have to all have 20 street trees as our landscape, and those things don't take much maintenance, but they're still good learning experiences once the kids get to them.
Awesome. And I see Anna has a question. If a family adopts a bed, how do you get around school gates?
We don't have gates on our property. Well, we don't have gates where our garden is. Our garden is in the very front of the school. And maybe that's an unusual situation. We have also, the other perennial question is vandalism. And we have I can say we have suffered virtually zero vandalism in 18 years of school gardening. And there is another school on our campus. We share a campus with another school, and they had a garden right across the parking lot, and their garden got vandalized. And I think part of the reason is our garden looks like somebody cares about it. There were people coming and going all the time, and it looked like it was being cared for. So I guess I'm one of the lucky few that we don't have to have a gate.
I think, Anna, I think that question, I had a ready answer a couple months ago, and now I think that might be changing for us. So basically how we've done it is that we do combination locks, and then we just, share the combination with, whoever needs it. And in addition to the weekly day, we also do what Kris was talking about, where we have families sign up to like water for a week, or take care of one section of the garden for the whole summer, or that sort of thing. But as I'm saying that, I also know that our district's doing a lot of security upgrades to where just to get onto campus, like it's locked up with a key that basically you have to be a district employee to get in that. So I'm actually not sure what to do in that case, but generally it's been combination locks. Emily, anything about that? I guess that was.
Yeah, and I know in Vancouver, thank you. And I see Barbara Nordstrom, I think, is on the call today, and Barbara's got a system of daisy chains. So the maintenance team has their lock, and then the Hazeldale Garden has their lock daisy chain to it. So somebody can unlock it and then relock it, and multiple locks have access to the system. We also have some schools where the building operators are working all summer long. So it's just building that relationship with your building operator or your maintenance in the building, and setting up a schedule with them. Say, hey, we plan on being here this date, this time for this many hours, and if you can open it, we'll tidy it up and lock it when we leave. So that's another piece. I know in the Vancouver schools for sure we have some gardens that are behind gates, and we have to rely on staff to be able. So working with their schedule and knowing what works for them is another piece to that puzzle. I was just looking through the chat. I didn't see any of the questions coming through. Watering. Let's talk about watering, because that's huge. If you don't have water, you don't have plants growing really well, especially if we have another summer like last year. What are your systems set up, and how did you get those in place? I've seen them done so many different ways. What are systems that you have seen worked, and things that you would say to folks, don't try that because it could lead to that? So what are some key things to know about irrigation?
Maybe that the school outside faucets almost all have those funny little hex key things that you have to use. So somebody can't just turn the water on and leave it on easily. So that's actually maybe a plus. But for me, that's just planning for your site. I just went around with a group of second graders at Pleasant Valley, and our criteria checklist is there access to water if we're going to put this thing in? So They recognized right away that maybe some of their favorite sites weren't going to work because there wasn't water nearby. So you work with what you've got.
And that's a thing you can buy at a, they sell those. I used to think that that was just a special thing that only district people could own, but you can get water keys. But that's, if that's your source, then you may not be allowed to leave it on. Like if you have sort of a timer or something, you may not be able to leave it on the whole time or even leave the hose connected. It's hard. We hand water everything basically, hardly without exception. And sometimes people look at us like we're crazy. But early on we tried, some systems with timers, and maybe we got too fancy. And then when there was, issues with the system, there weren't enough people that knew how to work on them. And so we just sort of abandoned those systems. I feel like there's a few gardens where volunteers on their own will just do a really simple, little timer on a hose with like a couple little sprinklers or something like that. But generally we just, we try to water, depending on the weather, 3 days a week or something, and try to farm that out to volunteers, and then do what we can to not have to water, mulching, use a lot of mulch, a lot of leaves and stuff.
Yeah, I'll agree with Ian. We do all our watering by hand, and I teach the students and also any volunteer families that take over the garden to deep water. So watering deeply and less frequently is actually better for the plants. It encourages the roots to go down deeper where the soil is always moist. And then mulching on top of that will help to hinder evaporation. So unless we're getting a summer like last summer, we can get by with watering once or twice a week.
That's great. And Nate asked about availability of students to water in August and September. Depending on your district, and if your campus is open, not all campuses are open to the public. So if your campus is open, then just working out that system and expectations. And I think Erin Figgy's on this call as well. She's from Illahee. And Erin does a great system with signage in her garden. So these gardens are open and this one is active. So this one needs to be watered, or this bed is actually closed, so we're not going to worry about that. So using signage when you can't be there to coordinate, those tools that help your volunteers know when they should water and what they should be watering.
I could say something about that. Just that like during the summer, we have an open garden time for all of our gardens. I don't know if that got mentioned already. And so like we have a big sign on all of our fences that say, anybody want to come on into the garden and, volunteer to water or just hang out or take food home. And so people can see that and they know that that's like the designated time for people to go in, which is really great. It stays the same all summer. And yeah, that's like students, sometimes students stop by themselves. Sometimes it's families, sometimes it's just a volunteer. So that's really great to have kind of like that schedule set up. And if there's, and there's always a point person for that, whether it's like a super volunteer, as we call them, or one of us on staff that kind of gets them started, walks through the garden with them and, answers any questions before, leaving them as the point person.
That sounds like a really great solution. Thank you. I'm just reading back through the chat here. Erin says they do have some drip irrigation at their beds out at Illahee, which is the Evergreen School District as well. So, and I think Barbara has that in the Hazeldale Gardens too, an irrigation system that's set up on timers. So to be respectful of time, we have time for just kind of one more major point. So those folks who are planning on their spring gardens this spring, knowing what we know, Just one more bit of knowledge to pass off to folks that we haven't already discussed, and then we'll open up, we'll unspotlight everybody and open the discussion to the whole group. So what's one other nugget of information you want folks to know? And I'll add from what I've learned is just start really simple. Sunflowers, marigolds, and nasturtium are great for kids to harvest the seeds, especially if the kindergartners plant that spring, and in the fall, the next round of kindergartners have something to harvest so that they can plant the following spring, and that kind of builds that ownership over time. The seeds are large enough, it's that fine motor tactile skill, and when is a marigold exactly right to harvest, and you can tie in math and all that kind of stuff to it. So that's always my one nugget for teachers. Like, this sounds overwhelming. It's like you start really simple, and then there's different colors and textures for that whole sensory experience as well. Is what I find kids really love, is just being able to touch and peel and pull things apart. So what else do we need to let our group know about, guys?
I think it's important to have clear expectations with the students before you take them out. And I mean, we don't want to rigidly control them, but we do want to let them know that this is not recess. And so there are safety protocols, there are things that we need to do to make it an enjoyable experience for everyone. And so sharing those things ahead of time, letting the kids know the expectations, letting them know the boundaries. And if you're a teacher and you're new to taking kids out and you're like, how am I going to take 25 kids outside by myself or whatever? Just like planting the garden, we recommend start small. Taking the kids outside, I recommend start small. Try just 5 minutes if that's all they can do. And just maybe start by letting them just explore, just free exploration in the space for a while. And as they get more comfortable and gain more confidence in the space, then you can stay out for longer and try to do more things.
Yeah, that's really good stuff, Kris. I like that.
Yeah, that's great. Emily, what's your bit of advice for folks?
I don't know. There's I guess I would just say, take it easy and take it small, and also, the garden can also be beneficial in ways, to the adult and to the teachers, just them with the garden itself. There's so much that having a school garden and plants around can really do for people. And, just taking the time to kind of really connecting it with it yourself and enjoying it, I think is a huge way to be able to kind of get motivated and to be with your garden. And it also can, kids know a lot of information. A lot of them will have gardens at home, or a lot of them will know these certain vegetables and how to use them and cook with them. And I think just taking the time to also learn from them as well is a huge, a school garden is just a big community space all around. So.
Yeah, that's good. Kris, you said something about expectations, and I mean, you don't have to use these, but we could share our little garden rules that we use. And I know that there's, I don't know where that resource is, Jane, where we have sort of a front and back sheet for teachers, like basically some basic things to do out in the garden, but we picked some of this up from Seattle Tilth, but we have these, so when we get out in the garden, or maybe if you're in the classroom, you could start before you get out there, but kind of kids stand up and they do a little motion. So they do like a walking motion. And the first rule is walk in the garden. And then we go like this, and we say, wait to be invited, listen with respect, and take a deep breath. And let's all take a deep breath together. And so, you know, none of those rules start with the word no or don't. So you will get very sick of saying don't run in the garden. So it's nice to say walk in the garden. And we walk so we can stay safe. You know, you can ask the kids, you know, what do you think? Why would we walk in the garden? To stay safe, also so we can notice things. If we're running, we might not notice some really neat stuff that's happening out there. And then we wait to be invited is a proactive thing you can do instead of like, don't touch that. And so you're waiting to be invited to use a tool. You're going to get to use tools today. You're going to get to taste things and smell things, but just wait to be invited to make sure we don't eat something that's, you know, not ripe or, you know, that sort of thing. And listen with respect. We're listening to the teacher, but we're also going to listen to each other. So if your classmates have, you know, ideas, we're going to listen to them. And also we're going to listen to the other living creatures in the garden and the plants. And if that seems silly, guess what? It's not silly. They have stuff to teach us. And also we can, you know, if we pick up this worm, what is that worm saying? You know, does it want to be in the bright sunlight? You know, does it want to be treated roughly, or does it want to go be with his family? And so just sort of listening there, and then taking a deep breath is one that we added on. It used to be the 3 rules, but we just do that a lot. Especially if we see something scary and we want to scream, you know, a spider or something, we can just take a step back. We can have control over our bodies, and we can just take a deep breath, and that helps us feel calm in the garden. So anyways, and we sort of do that, and then, you know, as kids go from class to class or go through their school, if they're sort of hearing those same, you know, walk in the garden, let's wait to be invited, that language starts to kind of get go with the culture of being outside. And like Kris says, it's not recess, and that's important to reset that little button that says I'm at recess. So yeah,
I like that idea to keep the guidelines or the rules on a positive note. We do that too. I try not to say no or don't, and to reframe everything as positive. And as parents or as teachers or whatever, it does make us have to stop and think about what we really want to say to the kids, right? We're so used to saying no and don't and stop. But if we can say, this is what you can do, that's what they will do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. And taking that breath just now, didn't realize how needed that was. So thank you, Ian, for that. I'm going to unspotlight our speakers here so we can all see the group here. And I failed to introduce one of our other folks in the audience today, and I might put her on the spot. Sammy Springs is with Clark County Public Health in the Clark Green Schools program. And I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. Clark County Public Health Green Schools has an amazing set of resources as well on their website, including a school garden map. And Sammy, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about some of the resources on your webpage?
Sure thing. Yeah, so we have some great sustainability grant opportunities, as well as grants for school gardens. So we have a blog post and as well as a web page for those. And then if you're not on our map, we have a really awesome map that showcases all the school gardens and outdoor classrooms and other, you know, green schoolyards around the county. So that's also on our website, and I can plug that into the chat too here pretty soon. And you know, you can play around with it and see if your school is on there. And if not, send us an email and we'll put you on there.
Thank you, Sammy. Sorry, I didn't introduce you sooner. And one of the things that we're going to use that map for is when we get back to on-campus in-person gardens, we would love to tour your gardens. Even if your garden is starting out and you would like all of us to come to your garden and we can help brainstorm ideas for your gardens, that would be great. But I know we've had some really great garden tours already. We have some of those recordings on our website. So when you go to our school garden toolkit, we have a tour of Illahee and Hazeldale and the Frontier Middle School on our website. Apologize for my very low technology versions on the Illahee and the Hazeldale, but the gardens are pretty great if you can't make it to those sites. But if you would like your school to be on a tour, please go ahead and email us at hello@lowercolumbianaturenetwork.org. And we would be happy to add you to our garden tour list once we kind of get past, hopefully, this COVID and restrictions and things like that. I would also like to add one more thing in the chat. We are planning for our next teacher workshop that will be in April, and we would love to have a plant and seed swap. You don't have to have anything to donate. I know Kris and I both have some large bags of seeds that we would love to share, even if they're a year or two old. They may not be the most viable seeds, but we do have seeds to share. I've got some newer ones too. And if you have a need for plants or seeds, I'm putting a link to a spreadsheet in the chat box right there. Let's see, did that go through? I'm sorry, let me try this again here. Okay, so this spreadsheet here, go ahead and put your name, your contact information, and what you need or what you have that you can share with other schools. We'll figure out a location to meet, try to be centrally located, and you can bring your materials on a date, or if you need us to deliver, we can do that too. We'll figure that out. But we would love to help you get your garden in the ground. I see Nate is on here from Walnut Grove. Nate's got all these new garden boxes out there that I'm sure he's dreaming up ideas of how best to use those. So Nate, don't worry, we can get you plants if you need those as well. So plan on April, probably, sometime after spring break, we'll plan on getting that out to you all. So we'd like to open it up now with a few more minutes left in the call. If you have any questions or comments for our panelists or for each other, or a quick something to share, please go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know how you're doing with your school.
I am getting excited, Jane. Yes, we're getting close. Someday the dirt will show up, we hope. Kind of one question I have is I have just sort of on the side been mentioning to teachers that the garden boxes are coming and going to be available. And I've got a fair bit of interest. And so my question is, anybody have thoughts or experience dividing a small space amongst more people who want it? Right, I think we have 3 garden boxes or 4, if I remember correctly, once they're all full. And we've got obviously 6 grades, and each grade has 5 classes in it. So that's, we've got 600 kids that I want to split a small space from. Any thoughts on how anyone has done that in the past?
Yeah, Nate, Mark Watrin, Battleground. I've got a school right nearby me. We've just got 2 raised beds, 4x8. And we essentially just split them in half. So first grade has half a box, second grade has half a box. We gave them a general planting plan that would help coordinate with their curriculum if they wanted to, or they could invent their own. We've got another school that I like their system. We're kind of using it as a model. They've worked towards having 1 raised bed per grade level. And then that grade level gets together and co-plans how they're going to plant that. And that ownership, whether it's a half a box or a whole box, really seems to invite people to take advantage of the space, it seems like.
Awesome, thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's what I've seen schools do too, is just divide it up and start small. And if the need is so great that we need to build more boxes, what a great problem to have. And we have more spaces where we can put boxes at that school for sure. Other questions, ideas? Where's your school at with your garden? I know we have some really experienced people on the call too.
Mine's just a question, but I was wondering, so I've been seeing a lot of raised beds going in some of the new schools in Vancouver, and I think that's awesome. But I'm trying to think about so you have your champion group, and school or the grades can come in and work in the beds, but how much outside time is required for the people running it to keep it going? Is that, I don't know if that question makes sense, but I'm just wondering how much does a person have to do outside of school or those kinds of things to make sure that that garden continues to thrive?
Anna, or did you say you're just talking about a raised bed, or what's kind of the scope? I think it probably depends a lot.
I've been just seeing
so I work for Snap Ed and I bounce around to a lot of the different schools, and the newer schools have, I want to say like 4 raised beds, maybe 6. I'm not sure, but a bunch of new schools went in this year and they have raised beds like in their courtyard. I don't even know what's going on with most of them, but I was just curious if, you start, it's like you get all the plants going, all those things, and then I don't know, is it like one teacher who has to go out and like weed and water and do these things, and like how much outside time does that require?
Well, theoretically, 1 4-by-8-foot bed doesn't require a lot of maintenance in and of itself, especially depending on how you plant it and how you plant it, right? The mulch, as we talked about earlier, is going to help retain the moisture. It's also going to suppress the weeds. Using something like the square foot gardening method allows for close planting, which also helps to shade out weeds and minimize maintenance. Also, if the soil is being brought in, that brings in like a weed-free environment to start with. So it makes it easy to see weeds, and if you can keep on top of it as you see them coming up. I don't know how other schools do that. Our garden is a gardening elective, so the kids do most of the maintenance as part of our gardening class.
That's a great point, Kris. At Houck Elementary, when we first started building gardens, the 4th grade teacher was willing to adopt and provide 1 day a week. They would go out for a half hour and do volunteer community service in the garden. So depending on whatever the tasks were. And so 1 week they might pull some weeds, and the next week they might prune something. So just breaking it up into those little tasks allows it to kind of keep it manageable, like Ian was talking about, or Aaron was talking about, how to keep those tasks going. And just knowing those expectations, like what do we expect this to look like, is another key thing, especially with your principal and administrators. If they have high expectation, this is going to be a very maintained and orderly looking garden, is different than maybe a native pollinator garden. So just kind of setting those expectations right up front will help kind of with that long-term maintenance and management.
Does that answer your question, Anna?
Yeah. I was just kind of curious as a whole. I was like, oh, how much time, since you guys are kind of the champions of the gardens, I'm like, how much outside time is required of you to make sure it keeps going?
That's interesting, and I don't know how relevant our answers are. I think some of our gardens are larger than normal. And among these 19 gardens, we've got like 300 fruit trees or something. So for us, it's a different equation where we just did a pruning tour of all the gardens where our crew kind of went around, and we used some volunteers and we used some students, but a lot of that was sort of us, and that's sort of what we're biting, what we planted very optimistically some years ago, and now we have to chew what we bit off. But that's not the same thing as what teachers might choose to do at their school. And I think that's part of the thing, is kind of looking ahead, like who's the group, what are we willing to do? I'm willing to put in an hour a week, I'm willing to be here 10 days over the summer, whatever, like what is that? And then kind of like how what can we manage with that investment? And they really are all different.
And Anna, I'm not trying to be funny, but since really the core of what a lot of us are trying to do is get kids to learn and be creative, if something doesn't get taken care of, there's probably a lesson in that. And so I've run into lots of times where I've gone out to someplace like, ooh, that's been neglected a little bit, and it turned into a great activity.
Awesome. All right, we are almost at the top of the hour. I would like to thank all of you for spending your time with us today. I apologize. I will work on the spreadsheet. I see that I didn't quite click the settings, so I will make sure everybody has access to that spreadsheet for the April swap. I'd like to thank all of our presenters, Kris and Mark and Aaron and and everybody who came out today to help share your wisdom today. It is greatly appreciated. And Emily, if you want to see some of these gardens in place, I'm sure they will all be open, having you out to visit their sites and give tours. I can tell you North Lake Elementary is amazing. If you're up in the Longview area, I would highly suggest popping on by to check it out. So I'll leave the call open for a little bit if anybody else has any other questions, but we'll wrap up the recording for now. And this will be posted on our website. So if you or your colleagues missed it, Michelle will get it up on our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to share it with other folks. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate all of it. And we wish you a good, happy spring as you start your planning. So thank you.